Hey, hey. All right, we're recording. How are you guys? How's everything? I could update you, but the truth is that would take at least 15 minutes of me thinking and recollecting some stuff. So, since what's been happening has been consistent in a very, I want to say, beautiful way, I am just going to dive into today's video. And the video today is about learning. The only true step towards learning is understanding the gap between where you are and what you are attempting. So I have difficulty with the word learning. Like every other word, I feel like we have gotten to a pattern of misusing them. And there's no depth to the words that we attribute to things and concepts. At least I never was able to explore that depth. So the word learning for me was very was something I very much like disliked. I didn't like to approach it. And I'm realizing right now that over the course of these videos, what I do is I remove certain words from my vocabulary because I feel they're not really expressive, or at the very least, they're not elaborating on the concept they're trying to explain. So what happens is I go like, no, I don't like this word. For example, one of the words I started not liking about 2, 3 years ago was acceptance. And right now, it holds a completely different meaning to me than it did back then. So I'm not sure if I used the word shallowly or the fact that we basically learn irony, right? The word, the words basically in a very shallow manner. And what happens is I slowly kind of like reach an emptiness that these words kind of fulfill, which gives them the depth that I'm actually looking for. Because what ends up happening is basically like I'm trying to explain something or elaborate on something and I see that gap. So again, like I used understanding, I used learning, and I used gap while trying to explain a different word. And so learning for me is has been one of those words where it's like, no, I don't think we learn because we are not involved in the learning process. Because your mind does its own thing, right? Like I can look at a physics book for like 15 hours maybe and not get anything out of it. And I could basically look at a page for 20 minutes, and that would be enough for me to get the gist of something. And any time I return to that page or to return to that something or try to apply it, then I explore it differently, thus understanding it more. Again, the world is built on concepts. There are things that we figured out from nature, but we don't know why they happen. We know how they happen, we don't know why they happen. We kind of attribute the causes of it, like, why does a tree create oxygen? Well, ultimately, it doesn't create oxygen, it absorbs carbon from the CO2 in the air, which leaves oxygen. But like, why does it do that? Well, because it needs carbon to actually like grow. But like, why did it actually like decide to grow, right? Ultimately, there's a why that we attribute to God slash life slash the universe slash the cosmos. The Hindus basically, or the Buddhists, the Far East, kind of like attribute cosmic energy as the energy of life that we kind of like that the energy that's literally like a car when you turn it on, you can do a lot of stuff with it, but that intention to turn on the key, to turn the key on, is what sets everything in motion, and that's what we kind of like flow with as cosmic energy, or at least me, because I'm the one still like pressing on the brakes, I'm pressing on the fuel, I'm doing all that stuff. Like that's basically the intention, which I feel is cosmic energy flowing through us. But the idea is, let's go back to the scripts. The only true step towards learning is understanding the gap between where you are and what you are attempting. What you are attempting or who you will be after you figure it out. That could be self-actualization. Because there's a conscious approach to who I will become after this is done. And I think that's self-actualization. You're actualizing yourself in a way that you couldn't imagine it before. But the only true step towards learning is that understanding, and it's not understanding of what you're learning, it's that distance between the truth behind what you're learning and where you are right now. See, learning, man, I don't know why. I'm getting the feeling that learning is not really about yourself and is not really about something or the concept that you're approaching. I always use the word exploration because ultimately what you're doing is you're exploring yourself through a new concept. But I maybe the learning process is basically the mental shift itself between where you are right now and when you are right then. So learn, to learn, learning in the process of learning, to learn. But learned doesn't really work anymore, right? It seems like when you claim learned, that means you closed that gap. So what you are attempting here, I'm writing it down, between where you are and what you are attempting. What you are attempting comes with an expectation. I mean, that's how I wrote it, dude. Again, like I'm not being philosophical or spiritual. I wrote something and I'm trying to understand what I wrote. What you are attempting has an essence of magic behind it. It's a visualization. I was like, I'm attempting to build a sandcastle, right? And the learning is the process between me being here without a sandcastle and me at the end of a sandcastle. So there's an image of a sandcastle or it's being built as I go. So the learning curve, and what people say learning curve, what happens is basically I go like, okay, this is a wall. Oh, now the castle kind of looks more squarish. Or I'd need 4 or 5 like towers at the castle. And then after that, maybe I had a different vision of I could do this, I could do that, or this might be nice, or and then like, or I could be like one of those architect dudes or dudettes that kind of like design everything beforehand and then attempt it. But ultimately, there's a gap between where I am right now and what I want to be done. So it's not really about me, and it's not really about them. It's about that little brief gap, which seems to look like a journey. It's the time you are actually spending on that little project. Attempting. Attempting means you're you're doing an action without well, an attempt is an action with an expectation. And your goal is to actually go towards your goal is actually to like go through an experience, and the only way you could kind of like self-actualize through it is if it's finished or if you complete that experience. And you can complete that experience by quitting, or you can complete that experience by finishing the project. So either way, they're attempts, and you are kind of like separated from the attempt itself, regardless of how you try to kind of like include yourself. So, so learned something is an accomplishment. I have already learned that. It still doesn't point at I have understood it, but it is showing us that I've underwent a process. So, well, the most honest step towards learning is genuinely acknowledging the distance between now without your project and then with your project. That does have a ring to it. That does make sense. That's the gap. That's the time you spend with that project that we can call learning. But we're not necessarily pointing if it's like high level learning or low level learning, high speed learning or slow learning. We're not really judging its productivity, are we? But we are acknowledging that state as the state of learning. Okay? I think that means in the future, anytime I'm learning something, I actually have to envision something as an ending to that state, or else you're constantly not really fulfilled. Because like whatever you're absorbing, whatever action you're taking is not really like registering for you to actually get some feedback from. So it's a state. I will fuck not, man. It's a video, and I love you guys.